Welcome to Reach Church. I'm Marshall Fant, the Director of Church Consulting and Strategic Planning for Gospel Fellowship Association Missions. My purpose is to encourage pastors and church leaders as you refocus, renew, and revitalize your churches. We've established this podcast to offer practical tips and suggestions as you equip disciples to make disciples. It's Marshall Fant with GFA Missions Reach Church. So glad to have you with us today. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, you see the man sitting next to me. If you're listening, his name is Bruce McAllister, and he needs no introduction to our audience. So Bruce, thanks for joining today.
Great to be here.
Yeah, so this is a topic that I think is near and dear to all of us. And Bruce, you are, again, for those that don't know, if you're just listening to Reach Church for the first time, Bruce and I serve together here at GFA Missions in ministering to the American churches. And so Bruce leads a ministry really in what I consider on the personal side. So you really help pastors. You're a counselor and friend of pastors, as well as you lead our GFA church staffing website, and just you've been helping pastors for 40-something years. So that's little Bruce's background. And I just kind of go in and stir up churches and then leave it to you to solve the problem. So, again, today's podcast is a topic, Bruce, that needs to be addressed. And I know that as you and I speak together sometimes in some conferences, that this is a topic you're burdened for. Yeah. And really, so the topic for our listeners, the topic is finishing well. All right, so I think our challenge would be this is addressed to pastors and their families. I think it's also the audience should be any church leader that loves their pastor and loves their church. Yep. So we all can finish well because it's a topic that's got to be addressed because some men do it very well. They really do. And others struggle in this area, and we're going to talk through maybe some reasons they do. All right, because men that stay too long become a hindrance to their churches as well as to just the work of the Lord in so many ways. So I want to and by the way, before we get into it, Bruce has written a lot of articles on helping pastors, and some of the articles on retirement and when to change ministries we will put in the show notes, and you also can find those on the GFA Missions website. Okay, but I want to get some of the housekeeping out of the way so when we start our discussion, we can just and keep flowing. So, Bruce, welcome. Thanks for taking the time this morning to record.
Great to be back.
And I know there are a couple of verses that you really are anchors in this area. So you want to launch into those first?
Sure. Acts 20:24, Paul speaking to the Ephesian elders, and great address there at Miletus. And verse 24 of that chapter 20, he says, but none of these things move me, neither count I my life dear unto myself, so that I might finish my course with joy. Amen. And the ministry which I've received of the Lord Jesus to testify the gospel of the grace of God. So Paul had been in ministry for a good while. He knew he was headed into trouble. He knew the Spirit of God was giving him pre-warning through others that he was going to face trouble if he went to Jerusalem. He went on to Jerusalem anyway. He faced the trouble, and he got himself an all-expense-paid Mediterranean tour all the way to Rome. And he actually, by doing that, fulfilled what he did. Had been revealed to Ananias of Damascus, that he would testify before Jews and Gentiles and kings. So Acts 21 through 28 really is the fulfillment of the final phase of Paul's ministry. He did a little more. We know of in 2 Timothy. He was imprisoned, released, re-imprisoned, and then martyred. And I love 2 Timothy 4:7 as well, where Paul says, I fought a good fight, I finished my course, I have kept the faith, henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me in that day, and not to me only, but unto all those also who love his appearing. So it was a big deal to Paul, and should be a big deal to us as well, to finish well the race that God has put before us.
Okay. So with this, what I want to focus on, because finishing well means different things to different people. All right. So finishing well, I think a common problem you and I see would be men that are called of God to pastor. They've been pastoring a long time. They've had probably a very fruitful ministry, and then it comes time to transition. So the first thing I want you to address is, why should we be faithful to finish well? And then, Bruce, I want to shift in because you've made some very good points of maybe hindrances to that, or some problems that may come up, or obstacles, maybe, if that's a good word, to finishing well. All right, so let's first deal with the positive. Okay, so what are some key points as you minister to pastors and as you work with pastors? So what are some of the challenges of why we need to be faithful?
All right. Well, faithfulness is a big Bible concept, and it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. Yeah. We're stewards of the mysteries of God. This is First Corinthians chapter 4, the early verses. So faithfulness essentially means being active, staying with the God-given task. Luke 12 talks about this. When the master came, he was to find doing what the master had asked him to do. It is involved in being attentive to the details of life and ministry. Luke 16, Luke's parable there, being faithful in little or much, being faithful in that which belongs to another person,
right.
Being faithful in the unrighteous mammon, he says, who will give you true spiritual riches if you don't take care of things like money. And so it means being attentive, and it also means being fruitful or productive. Luke 19, taking the pound, turning it into 5 pounds, 10 pounds, that was commended. Hiding it and not being productive was not looked on favorably in that setting. And so there's just a lot of good information in those 3 parables in Luke's gospel about being faithful. That does not mean that you just go straight from the pulpit to the grave under normal circumstances.
Right.
It doesn't. There is a planning process. We are all going to time out, and health issues or just whatever may be the underlying cause. There is a time when. Yeah. You'd love to just preach your last sermon and go to heaven, but it probably won't work out that way for most people.
All right, so I think the way I've heard you say it, and I've said it often, there's seasons of ministry. Okay, when you come to the church, you're establishing a church. If you're church planting or replanting or taking over a work that's already existing, there's seasons, and one season or a couple of seasons we need to recognize is, okay, I want to have a point where I transition. I want to finish well to that point. But doesn't mean it just means I'm going to the next season. It doesn't mean I'm finished. Right. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah. I've stayed with a farming couple, 80-year-old farming couple in Indiana a few years ago, and they and their family farm 5,000 acres of field corn and soybeans. This man has lived on that property, just really within a few feet of where he lives now. He's lived here the whole time. Well, they are still having abundant crops and great fruitfulness. They've been working that land for his entire lifetime, I assume. And I think ministers can look at the latter phase of ministry like that. You've invested in a lot of people. You know a lot of situations. You've been praying, preaching, ministering, soul winning, discipling, mentoring, hopefully the whole spectrum. So this can be a very enjoyable, fruitful season. Psalm 92, they shall still bring forth fruit in old age. They shall be fat and flourishing to show that the Lord is upright and there's no unrighteousness in him.
Right.
And I think it may not be that we are physically as active and energetic and so on, but it can be fruitfulness. Fruitfulness comes from the Lord's work. It's not just our hyperactivity. It's that God is blessing in a multi-generational way. And I'm enjoying that phase of life and ministry now as I get to be out. I invested in a lot of guys, training them for ministry when I was full-time in college ministry. And so now, just like this past Sunday, I got to go out and be with BJ and Heather Worley in Beckley Springs, West Virginia, and just to see what God is doing there, see their church. They've been there 20 years, and I love doing that type of thing. And sitting down, having a meal, hearing from them about what's going on in their lives.
But you've transitioned from one phase to the next phase, from one season to the next season.
That's right.
So I guess as men, all right, so let's reverse it, okay? Because I love the parables. I love the way you laid that out. But there are some hindrances or obstacles that come up that may prevent men from either seeing the need or once they see the need, then actually, pulling the trigger and going to the next phase? Or so what are some of the hindrances from men either going to this next season of ministry or even, maybe they never get there, okay, for several reasons. All right, so what are some of those reasons? Because you've laid them out well.
Right. So I would say in general, there are two major categories that can be problematic. One is just procrastination. Just not taking time to think through this whole transition that you really need to go through. In America, most people retire, they say, around the age of 65. And some will stretch that to 70, and maybe some pastors will go on and keep pastoring and preaching maybe to 72. And, there may be some that, my father-in-law kept going until he was 85, but he had a small church, and he served there for 61 years. He was bivocational, supported himself. So that's pretty rare. But so all
right, can we park right there a minute? So he was bivocational. So really, as he was there in those older years, he was not a drain on the church.
Oh, no.
Okay. All right, because that is one of the problems when you get into the topic you're going to say. So
he had his retirement, all that was in place. So he actually became, in a sense, full-time with the church after 40 years of bivocational ministry. So it was just perfect. They lived in the neighborhood and all that. And they had a guy who succeeded them. That was another bivocational pastor that was already known to the church. So there's every situation's a little bit different. But
sure.
I think procrastination, and we can go into that. Let me just refer to a second area. And that would be the area of pride, okay, where someone wants to, some men may go, okay, now I'm done. I'm totally done. I'm gonna do what I want to do now. I'm going to be unencumbered. In other words, here's the danger. A man may say in his heart, in essence, I'm going to live independently from God, and I'm going to control my life and do what I want to do. And that pride is always the problem with that type of thing, living independently from God. And some men will actually experience moral failure or other types of failure late in life because their heart got off focus of the Lord. So I just think we got to, you think the wisest man apparently who ever lived, Solomon, and in the Bible, it's so sad to read about Solomon's later life. It says his heart was lifted up with pride. He got involved in facilitating the worship of foreign gods and was all entangled in all types of, all the messy relationships of life that he was into. It was pride. And I think if Solomon could end so poorly, then the potential is there for any of us who get caught up in pride. Our heart gets lifted up, and we get pulled to the ways of the world and false living, false worship. It's hard to believe, but that's what happened to Solomon. And so if you want to read something really shocking about, would be Alexander White's, in his book on characters of the Bible, read the chapter on Solomon. Okay. And then read the one that's the following chapter, A Greater Than Solomon Is Here, when he talks about Christ. So that'll encourage you. But he pulls no punches about Solomon's latter part of Solomon's life. And it's a good warning. There's another thing I would encourage men to read. And I don't want to stay negative here, but the Donald Whitney years ago wrote and has also spoken this. You can find it both written as, in print on the internet, or it's spoken. It's called the almost inevitable ruin of every minister. I would encourage people to read that and to come back to it periodically and just let it be a little warning. So pride, and then procrastination. And procrastination in this sense just means not planning realistically on many fronts for your own transition. By the way, when we talk about retirement, we're not talking about inactivity.
No.
We're talking about transitioning from, say, the full responsibility of being a pastor to serving in another way, maybe voluntarily or part-time or something like that. We're not talking about stopping. We're talking about serving in a different
seasons of
venue.
ministry, just going from one to the other. All right, so let me ask you this on the big picture. So is procrastination a result of pride?
It could be. Just like I'm going to be here forever. Don't bother me. But
my preaching's just as good as ever been. Yada yada. Okay.
Right. Yep. So you got to plan spiritually. I think in that area, and you have to remember that old body is decaying, and that can affect a person's mind and heart and spirit. We're kind of all the components of our being are tied together. So we got to be sure that we're staying spiritually healthy and emotionally and mentally healthy.
So is this under procrastination?
Yeah, this would just be this in the category of kind of drifting spiritually. And I think we got to stay in the Word, in prayer, be fervent. That's all part of being faithful, is being fervent and finishing well, staying close to the Lord through the whole thing. And there's the practical areas of financial preparation, frankly, medical preparation.
All right, so let's park on finances first. Okay, so now we also have younger pastors listening to this, and younger church leaders who are helping create budgets.
Yes.
For churches. So I think there was the time when just live by faith, but we also know so much of Christ speaks of the handling of money. That's right. So if you are a deacon, I want to challenge you to help your pastor prepare at a young age. And then if you are a pastor, it's never too late to prepare, but you need to start early.
Yeah. Starting early is very important. Yeah, there is material out there, Christian Ministries resources, churchlawtoday.com website has a lot on pastoral compensation planning. So while we do live by faith, and we should always live by faith, there's also, the Bible talks about counting the cost.
Yeah.
And so there's a cost of living that's real that everybody in our culture lives under. And so it's a prudent thing, both the man himself, and he has to take primary responsibility for this, he and his wife, the pastor and his wife, but godly laymen who have some understanding about financial planning in our culture, they really should come alongside and do whatever they can to encourage proper financial planning. There are Christian people that specialize in this that can sit down with the pastor and his wife and help them to see what they need to be doing. And hopefully that is done, 20, 30 and more years out. But if you get down and you haven't done all of that, then tomorrow's not going to be the better day to do that. You got to get it underway today.
All right, so let me ask you this, because it was years ago a mindset for some of our older ones that the church would always take care of us, either as an emeritus or, and Bruce, tell me if I'm being too harsh, but when men say this, I say you are hurting the future of the ministry. Because if you're expecting your church to continue to pay you after you are really no longer the senior pastor, then you are taking money away from the current ministry. Is that too harsh to say it that way?
Yeah, I mean, there may be some churches that would be in a position to provide a small stipend, afterward, and then the care of the widow after the pastor is gone. But I think that on the whole, that is, frankly, I think it's unrealistic. Most churches are doing all they can do to take care of their current pastor, pay him full time. A lot of part-time ministries out there where they can't even do that. And then, like you said, the future welfare of that ministry. So I think it's much more prudent on the whole for a church and a man, his wife, to plan ahead so that they are financially independent from the church, if at all possible.
And when that happens, like some of the men you and I know that have done that, boy, there's such great freedom.
There is. Yeah.
Because they can go and be an interim, they can go serve on the mission field. I mean, they have so much freedom in this last season, but it didn't just happen overnight. So what you're saying is, you got to go and you've got to spiritually prepare and you've got to financially prepare. All right, so what other areas, pride, other areas of procrastination can you exhort us to think about?
Be sure you're legally prepared for the end-of-life issues. I mean, it just goes without saying, and I'm not presenting myself as any kind of expert on this front, but, you need power of attorney, you need health care power of attorney.
A will.
A will, trust. You need to, we did this some years back. We've had those kind of things in place through, I think, really all of our adult life. We have 4 children. And then we kind of stepped it up maybe 10 years ago or so and got everything freshened up and then gave all that information to our children and sat down with them, went through it. And so be sure that those kind of things are in place. Certainly for the man's widow, it's very, very likely the man will go into heaven first. That's the norm. Women outlive men. You see a lot more ladies in nursing homes than men,
Sure.
And so prepare for that. And I would encourage this, and I've done this in the last couple of years, just sitting down and not only having the documents and all your planning done, but actually paragraph out an explanation of that and have that where that's easily accessible. Because when the shock of, it could be a shock, when death comes and you're in the midst of that, then people need to know, give some guidance to your spouse and give guidance to your children, appropriately so that it's make it as easy on them as possible.
All right. So as we're trying to finish well, okay, and as we're trying we want to be a blessing to our church, want to be a blessing to those that have supported us, want to be a blessing to our family. I think another point you had made along the way as we finish well has got to do with location. Exactly. Okay, so where as we start this planning, okay, and so would you just touch on that briefly about location, what you mean by that?
Well, the question is that when a man, say, finishes his kind of his last pastoral ministry, do he and his wife stay in the church, or do they relocate to another city, another church in that city or town or region? Generally speaking, Marsh, I think it is best for a man to move on from the church. But if a man has planted that church, been with it, 30, 40 years, or is just pastor there for very many years, all of their friends likely most of them are in that church. So I think it's a judgment call. Many variables affect whether it's really feasible for him and his wife to stay in the church. And I've addressed that. A recent article that I posted on church staffing website, transition tips for retiring pastors. That might be helpful.
So that's on the GFA
church staffing website.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. GFAmissionsjobs.org, and under the Helps tab, there are
a lot of articles.
17 articles there now that are all about all kind of things about churches finding pastors and what the process is like, orderly transition steps for senior pastors, and the search process. There's all kind of stuff there. So maybe some of that would be helpful, but. Location. Location. Do you need to get near children? Maybe the children don't live in the area where you're currently pastoring. Do you need to relocate and get near children for end of life issues for the wife?
Because we're all going to die, right?
Yeah. So,
and I think 100%. you want to hold up some of your funeral.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of hobbies. I travel and preach, and I love all that, and I like to work in my yard. But
one hobby you do have.
Here's my hobby. I collect funeral programs. I go to a lot of funerals. We have a lot of funerals in Greenville. I've just been over to Alabama for the funeral of Ernest Matthews, a longtime family friend. My aunt here, Dale Crawford's mother, Michael Mann,
But the point is,
Joe, I'm just got
this is
it's 100%.
Yeah, okay. Right. Unless the Lord returns.
That's right. So.
And so at that point, again, a lot of these worries, of course, all these worries then gone. But before we get there, finishing well, we're talking about hindrances to finishing well. Yeah. And so this is reality. Yeah. But before we get there, location's got a lot to do with that, so we're not a burden on the church where we pastored, correct?
That's right.
Okay. All right. Anything else on location, or even, any other thing on procrastination?
I think we, I don't know. It's really easy to be inactive physically or to put off medical appointments. So I think we need to be sure to prepare medically by good health care, annual checkups, keeping an eye on ourselves, and following the doctor's recommendations for whatever it may be, diet, health, losing weight. And because we're inside this body, and this body's the temple of the Holy Spirit, and we've got some stewardship, and we need to take care of ourselves.
And this body is decaying.
It's decaying. But, you can debate whether you can add 1 hour to your life, like Jesus said. But God's got a timetable on all this. But we still need to be good stewards of that. So health care, I think that would be an important thing there. And then I think also preparing our churches for this transition time, and how that's a whole topic in and of itself.
Yeah, so let's just kind of end on that one. So let's just spend a couple of minutes on preparing the church, because I think, Bruce, a lot of in my opinion, the churches that I have been in that did not transition well, there was a failure on the pastor to prepare the church for the transition, either because of pride or procrastination. But there is a way to prepare a church for this, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And so, but it can't start at the day you're walking out. So you want to just big picture, 30,000 feet.
So let's say a man is intending to retire from full-time pastoral ministry at the age of, say, 65.
Mm-hmm. Now you say full-time. We still know there's another season where he can be very active and very productive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But let's just say that's his goal.
Right.
All right. So he's got to be making a lot of preparation if he's going to do that financially, et cetera. So, but then when he's about the age of 60, he needs to really be thinking about this. And by the time he is 63 or so, he probably needs to start talking to his deacons or elders, whatever he's got, and start talking about this. There's a lot of literature available. We've got a lot of books and things posted on our website where churches can, if he's been there a long time, in my experience is, excuse me, most men are staying a long time.
They are.
I mean, they're 20, 30, 40 years in ministry. So a church hasn't done this for a long time. They haven't looked for a new pastor. So,
which is a blessing.
It is.
Yeah.
But it can catch you.
There you go.
In I could tell stories here, but I'm going to hold off because I don't know who's all in the audience and who knows what. But some people will just do a real fast exit, and it's like,
what just happened?
Yeah. And then sometimes a man will actually talk to the whole congregation prematurely. So we
both have seen that.
Be careful about starting to, it destabilizes people. Mm-hmm. It can create dissension. It can create you as a lame duck pastor. So you make a reasonable plan, work it through with your lay leadership, keep that confidential, and it will probably be a little bit ideal and unrealistic when you make that, so you've got to adjust it down to the real. The reality is there are many more churches needing pastors today than there are pastoral candidates available. That's the reality.
Sure.
So
we're recording this in February of 2023.
Yeah.
Okay.
So our stats would say that we have about half as many candidates that we're helping to find a church to pastor compared to the number of churches that are seeking a pastor. And it's only going to grow, and probably it's going to become more challenging as time goes by. So I got a pastor call me yesterday, and he's ready to transition in a year or two. He wants to train somebody under him. He's my age, he's 68, 69, maybe 70. And I'm sure we'll be glad to help you. And I explained to him how we can do that.
Yeah.
But I think he's starting at, this is
a little late.
I don't know, but it's going to take time.
Yeah.
It's to find someone, then to bring them on,
and again, he could go ahead and transition out well and bring in an interim. And of course, that's my heartbeat. And you're a huge advocate of the interim ministry as well. So it is another way that this can be addressed, where everybody finishes well, right?
Yeah, and I think people are living a long time. People typically are healthy a little bit longer in life. You see this in the secular area, but I think it's particularly true in our Christian circles. I'm seeing a lot of Christian people are living to be 80, 85, even 90 and beyond. So it's reasonable that a man maybe would say, I'm planning to finish up about 70 in my senior pastor ministry. And that's variables affect that. So then if he were going to be in that case, then when he's 65, he starts really getting focused on this. And when he's 67 or 68, he's starting to talk to the lay leadership, and then people are going to get antsy anyway in the congregation. They're going to know he's timing out. They're going to even sense it maybe in certain ways, and so it's good for the man to take the initiative on it and get the process going.
And I've heard you say this before, and we'll kind of wrap it up with this, but I think you have often said that a pastor should have one trusty deacon or an older person, trustworthy, where he can go and say, hey, Do you think I've timed out? What do you think of this plan, right? So
Yes.
it'd be good to have one person in the church you can bounce this off of that will be honest and not just try to flatter you and say, oh, no, you got another 10, right?
Right.
So we need people speaking to our lives on this, probably both internally and externally.
That's right. Exactly.
So externally, you're a great resource. I'd be happy to help, but there are other people on the external side, but you need somebody on the internal side.
Exactly. I think of course your wife is a good sounding board. She knows you better than anybody. Then I think you need some close ministry friends of people, like say, outside your church that know you well, and you need those friendships developed over the years, and you can talk, frankly with those people and not fear the confidentiality of being broken. And then I do think there's a place for your best layman that would. Everybody in the church, if there were not a pastor, they would naturally, their reflex would be toward him, and he would be confidential in his deliberations with you. It might be more than one, it might be even two, but then be able to go to that person, just ask the questions and say, do you think the time has come, or is it coming?
Right.
And just talk to me. And you might want to get, occasionally there'll be a good HR, human resource type person in a church that knows this field or knows pastoral ministry well. That would be really good on this front. And then,
all right. So finishing well, hindrances would be procrastination and pride. The great parables that we can get encouragement from in the days of, okay, I want to finish well. So again, I appreciate your time. Anything else you want to say?
We have time on Frank. My friend Frank.
Oh yeah, let's give an encouragement from a good friend of both of ours.
Yeah. So retired GFA missionary Frank and Sherry DeBagno. We're in the same church,
and they served in Italy.
They served in Italy for, I'm not sure, but 30 to 40 years probably. And Frank's a great guy. Did tremendous evangelistic work in Italy. Pastored a church. So he was getting on towards 70 or so, and he contacted me. He said, I did jail ministry in college.
So now he's retired. All right, so let's set that. So he came off the field.
Came off the field, but when they came back to Greenville.
Right.
And he said, I want to get involved in jail ministry. So I took him with me to the Greenville Detention Center, and we would team tag, and I would preach and listen to him and vice versa. And so just small pod. So he did that for a while. And then lo and behold, the male chaplain there died of COVID. And sadly, good man.
At the detention center.
He got it there, I think, at the detention center. So they were looking for another male chaplain. And so lo and behold, through a due process of situation, Frank has become the male chaplain at the Greenville Detention Center. And he works in the afternoons there.
Right.
He really is the chaplain who is on the floor seeing there's generally 1,200 inmates at the Greenville Detention Center. Wow. He told me recently that he keeps a journal. He said, I've led 41 people to Christ in this. This is not even probably a year now that he's been doing this. And he just has opportunity after opportunity, and it's just perfect. And he told me this, I hope he won't mind me saying this, but he said, I think the Lord used my experiences in Italy to prepare me for this ministry. So he is bearing fruit in older age and really having the time of his life. And, that to me is just
absolutely
perfect. It's just ideal. And they do other things.
But he is finishing well.
He's finishing well.
Without being a burden to the church in Italy.
Yep.
Or maybe the supporters who didn't know how he would be doing, right?
Yeah, and you don't always get paid to do these kind of things, but I don't know if he gets paid much, but he's paid to do this.
Yeah.
So it provides some, modest probably retirement income, and gives him a focus, and he's got a purpose for getting up every day and
for the next season of life.
Yeah, they do other ministry matters. The Piedmont Women's Clinic. They've been involved in correspondence ministry with prisoners as well, and serving the church, and just all these kind of things. So I just think of Frank as it's just so neat firsthand to be seeing. And we're in touch with one another, a fair amount because I'm down there doing some work as well. So
great. It's a great way to close.
Okay.
All right. Bruce, thank you.
Okay.
Got any questions, be sure and call us at gfamissions.org. Again, Bruce McAllister. And all his articles are posted. They'll be in the show notes. If you're just listening, you can go to Missions, GFA, say that again.
GFAmissionsjobs.org.
All right, so that's the church staffing website.
Church staffing website.
Which is part of GFA.
That's right. And then you look for the helps tab.
Yep.
And that's where the articles are.
Great.
And there's books and resources there that we've posted up, and all your various podcasts on this.
Great.
Area, so.
All right, finishing well.
Okay,
thanks,
you.
Bruce.
All right.
Yep.
You're listening to ReChurch, a podcast of Gospel Fellowship Association Missions. If you would like more information about our ministry or how we may assist you and your church, visit us at gfamissions.org/consulting.